Hey Kaiju fans, Godzilla here with a special retrospective review to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Godzilla 1998, a film with no shortage of controversy within the Godzilla community. Yes, even 20 years after its initial release, Godzilla fans are still engaging in heated debates and vitriolic tirades against this oft-maligned blockbuster botch job. Now, those of you who know me from my GVA days know that I'm an unapologetic Zilla apologist, and one of the few fans who actually really like the 1998 Godzilla film. In fact, Godzilla 1998 is the film responsible for turning me into a lifelong Godzilla fan. I was 7 when this film came out, and all of my friends had seen it and were raving about how amazing it was. I begged my parents to take me to see it in theaters, but there was no way they were going to take me to a PG-13 movie at 7. I know, I had a rough childhood. They did, however, agree to let me watch some of the older Godzilla movies instead. I wound up getting Godzilla 1985 on VHS, and I've been hooked ever since. Christmas of 1998, they finally caved and got me a copy of what was then still the new Godzilla on VHS. It was one of those action movies I got to watch with my dad and brother, even though ordinarily I wouldn't have gotten to watch a movie like that, so at the time it was a very special experience for me. The effects were incredible, and the movie managed to create a spectacle the likes of which I had never seen before. In fact, all the hype surrounding this movie back in 1998 really created a sense of wonder about the movie, especially since I didn't actually get to see it until well after its marketing campaign had ended. Even in our small town, Godzilla was everywhere. Posters of his giant eye lined the windows of video rentals, toys cluttered the shelves of every store, and even my second grade class pet was an iguana named Godzilla. To this day, just seeing the logo for this movie takes me back to that time. Of course, not everyone at the time had such a glowing opinion of the first American Godzilla reboot. Despite the aggressive marketing and the fact that it made a ton of money, critics hated the movie and serious Godzilla fans loathed it. From my own experience, everyone at the time seemed to generally like this movie, so I was surprised to find out over the next couple of years on the internet just how much the Godzilla community hated it. Now that the movie is 20 years old, I decided to revisit Godzilla 1998 and see if all the hate is deserved, or if maybe Godzilla fans were too hasty in their harsh judgment of this film when it was released. After rewatching this movie for the first time in years, the first thing I noticed about it is how much better of an origin story it is than Legendary's 2014 reboot. Emmerich and Devlin completely wiped the slate clean with their effort, introducing a radically indifferent interpretation of the iconic monster. In the world of Godzilla 1998, the titular monster is as new to the characters in the film as it is to the audience, and that really helps to immerse you into the story. Unlike the 2014 film, the 1998 reboot focuses solely on Godzilla, and at the time it was only the third film in the series not to feature any other monsters. Without the distraction of a secondary monster, Emmerich and Devlin were able to create an origin story that stands on its own without the notoriety of the franchise to back it up. The film is wise to slowly introduce Godzilla to the audience, gradually building up the character's presence before unveiling the newly designed Big G. The film starts off with a memorable montage that explains the creature's nuclear origins, hinting that a lizard egg exposed to radiation during a nuclear test mutated into a monster. We then cut to a fishing ship where we get our first scene with the giant monster. Utilizing the oft-used hide the monster technique, we only see a glimpse of its claws sinking the fishing boat before the scene abruptly cuts away. In a way, the film mirrors the 1954 original. Godzilla's reign begins with a string of shipwrecks. His footprints are later found on land, indicating the presence of an enormous creature, and a Japanese fisherman reports that Gojira is responsible for the ship sinking in a very memorable scene. When Godzilla does finally show up, the filmmakers are sure to give him a memorable entrance. The scene with the old fisherman in New York is one of the most notable scenes in the movie, and the way Godzilla's spines cause the water to rush up is a perfect example of what makes Emmerich and Devlin so great at coming up with disaster movie set pieces. This scene was so well done that Toho would shamelessly rip it off to lesser effect a year later in Godzilla 2000. While the fans were outraged by Godzilla's death at the end of the film, his tragic demise makes the ending of the movie much more powerful. You can't help but feel sorry for Godzilla. After all, it was merely a product of mankind's nuclear experimentation. It didn't choose to be a giant monster. This really speaks to the fact that the '98 Godzilla is a multi-dimensional character that can evoke a range of emotions, just like the original Godzilla. When the monster is lured out with fish, you can't help but feel a sense of wonder just watching the creature walk. When it's chasing the taxi in the finale, it's an exhilarating thrill ride, and Godzilla truly feels like an uncaged animal on the loose. Giving Godzilla a tragic ending reinforces the message of the original film, making it clear that this movie is more faithful to the series' origins than many have given it credit for. While the '98 film represents a radical change for the Godzilla series, I can appreciate the lengths the filmmakers went in totally reimagining the character. Out of the 31 Godzilla films that have been produced to date, the '98 film easily stands out as among the most unique versions, and that in and of itself makes it worthy of a closer look. I am in the minority of Godzilla fans who actually really enjoyed this design. Patrick Chitopoulos did an amazing job creating not only a really unique interpretation of the iconic character, but of bringing to life a truly unique kaiju that rivals the imagination of Toho's monster makers. There's just something so 90s about this design. Godzilla's scales usually have a barky texture, but here they have a distinctly reptilian quality to them that looks really interesting. The spines also get one of the most dramatic overhauls we've seen on film. The distinctive shape of the classic spines is swapped out for a more basic spike shape. It essentially looks like a bunch of backwards-facing shark fins on Godzilla's back, and it's an interesting change. The decision to swap Godzilla's origin from dinosaur to iguana has been met with plenty of derision, but I do think it's an interesting direction when viewed as an experimental reimagining of the Godzilla concept. The idea that Godzilla-like animal mutants could pop up anywhere in the world due to nuclear experimentation is an interesting concept, and looking at the story this way makes some of the huge character changes to Godzilla easier to digest. Even the ending of the original Gojira hints at this possibility, when Dr. Yamane warns that if humans continue to experiment with nuclear weapons, another Godzilla could be born. Godzilla becomes shorthand for any mutant aberration born of the nuclear age. Just imagine if an irradiated iguana were to show up in a major city in real life. What would be the obvious codename the military would give it? Of course, they would call it Godzilla. The animated series backs this idea up, as each episode of the show features a new monster of the week that arrives as some sort of animal mutated by toxic waste or nuclear material. It really helps to cement the show as a new generation of mutated kaiju born from environmental contamination, and it's unfortunate that we never got to see this direction carried over into a sequel film. The '98 film also finds a creative way to preserve Godzilla's invincibility without derailing its attempt at a quote-unquote realistic Godzilla story. The filmmakers achieved this by making their Godzilla both agile and clever, making it nearly impossible for the military to land a hit on the kaiju. If your enemies can't manage to hurt you, isn't that kind of the same as being invincible? Another thing that I appreciate about this movie is the way it introduces the idea of kaiju reproduction into its plot in a way we've never really seen before or since. Sure, the 2014 film touches on it, but there's no payoff to it, so it may as well have not even been in the movie. Now, a lot of people complain that the Baby Godzilla sequence is a ripoff of Jurassic Park, and though there is some merit to this, I still think it's a really exciting part of the film. The adult Godzilla disappears in the middle of the movie, and the main cast goes deep into Madison Square Garden in search of its nest. They discover it just as the eggs begin to hatch, and must face off against hundreds of baby Godzillas, making for one of the most interesting sequences in the movie. The baby Godzillas allow the human characters to interact with Godzilla in a way never before possible, and the prospect of being eaten by the small creatures brings a new level of threat to the story. Very few films in the series have really explored the idea of bringing Godzilla down to human scale, and nowhere do we see this to the extent that we do in the '98 film. The characters realize that the creatures must be destroyed before they can run amok and continue to reproduce asexually, and I think that raises a really interesting possibility. Imagine if there had been a sequel where that actually happened. The Godzilla species could overrun the world, effectively ushering in a Godzilla apocalypse. I distinctly remember watching this movie for the first time and marveling at the then state-of-the-art special effects. Jurassic Park had come out 5 years before and revolutionized the world of special effects with CGI, but to my 7-year-old eyes, Godzilla 98 had more and better special effects than any movie I'd seen up to that point. Some of the CGI looks expectedly dated after 20 years, but for the most part the effects still hold up really well. Scenes where Godzilla shows up at night with lots of rain are the most effective, as this helps to conceal the special effects work. Godzilla's movements look very animal-like and realistic, and scenes that involve him swimming are done very gracefully. At the time, a lot of fans gave this movie flack for its heavy use of CGI, but there's actually a lot of really well done practical effects works at play throughout the movie too. On the DVD's commentary, we learn that the cityscape seen during the Apache chase sequence in New York is all done with miniatures, with Godzilla composited in afterwards. The epic explosion of Madison Square Garden towards the end of the film featured a large-scale miniature and real explosives, and the shot of the Chrysler Building's destruction used miniatures as well. Additionally, a giant animatronic Godzilla head is used quite effectively in a few close-up scenes, bringing an added sense of realism and detail to the creature. During the Madison Square Garden sequence, many of the baby Godzillas are portrayed using CGI. However, a number of them are realized using practical methods. In behind-the-scenes footage, we can see that traditional suitmation was used for the baby Godzillas, and was even considered for use with the adult Godzilla as well. The miniature work on display in the movie is executed very well, and the animatronics help the effects feel balanced and not overly digital. As a Godzilla fan, it gave me a new appreciation for the film, seeing just how many of the special effects shots utilized practical effects. Now, as much as I do enjoy this version of Godzilla, I can't ignore the obvious flaws it does have. I mean, this design is really bizarre. For starters, it just doesn't look like Godzilla. Nearly all of Godzilla's most notable features have been altered in an attempt to make the creature sleeker and more modern, but it would have been nice to have seen the filmmakers strike a better balance between maintaining the source material and doing their own thing. The 98 design looks like what someone who's never seen a Godzilla movie might come up with if you describe the monster to them. I'm not convinced this creature could even stand up correctly in real life. It has anorexic-looking legs and body, and it really seems like Tatopoulos drew inspiration from the iconic Xenomorph design in this regard. In spite of its light frame, the head and neck are enormous, and while this is the first Godzilla to have a traditional theropod body, it has giant human-proportioned arms. There's a reason T-Rex had tiny arms, and it's called balance. Between the frail legs, giant head and arms, and back full of spines, there's no way this Godzilla could move the way it does in the film. There's no reason this Godzilla design had to be so radically different from the classic character. There are plenty of designs that could have made Godzilla sleek and fast like in the film, but stayed more true to the design fans love and expect. I would even venture to say that if Tatopoulos had just given Godzilla a more recognizable face, fans could have put up with the rest of the design. It's the head that really makes this creature look incompatible with Godzilla. Far and away though, the biggest problem with Godzilla 1998 is that it's clear that the filmmakers just didn't have any respect for Godzilla as a character or the fandom that loves these movies. Devlin and Emmerich felt that Godzilla was a concept that needed improving upon, whereas the fans loved the films for what they are. In the end, the movie left longtime fans of the series with a sense of betrayal, and many fans still can't forgive the duo to this day. In interviews around the release of the film, Devlin and Emmerich made it clear that they weren't fans of the original movies and that they had no interest in making a Godzilla movie that was bound by the rules of the Japanese films. While I can't blame them for sticking to their artistic convictions, I do wish that Emmerich and Devlin had both held Godzilla and his fans in higher regard before embarking on making their film. With Godzilla, Emmerich and Devlin clearly wanted to repeat the success they had reimagining alien invasion B-movies into the blockbuster epic Independence Day. The problem is that they didn't realize Godzilla isn't a generic B-movie monster, or how rabid his fanbase is about maintaining the character's integrity. This is ultimately why fans felt betrayed by the film, and why so many still can't accept its genuine creative strengths as a kaiju film despite its many glaring flaws as a Godzilla movie. While it may not have been the Godzilla movie we deserved in 1998, ultimately it's the Godzilla movie we got. And in my opinion, there's plenty to love about this film. Godzilla 1998 was a radical departure from what fans of the series had come to expect, and it bravely defied that fan base in an attempt to realize a completely different vision of what the character could represent in a modern blockbuster. It certainly isn't a perfect movie, with more than its fair share of bad writing and poor characterization. But there's no denying the monster action of this movie was next level for its time, and the filmmakers gave us a spectacle that was unlike any other monster movie up to that point. I can understand the polarizing reactions to this movie at the time, but I think kaiju fans owe it to themselves to give this movie another shot with an open mind. If you still can't appreciate this movie after 20 years, well, that's your loss. Before I go, I want to leave you with just one final thought. If you can accept this as Godzilla, and if you're fine with Godzilla doing this, then you really can't be mad about this. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, let me know with a like, and Godzilla smash that subscribe button for more Godzilla content in the future. This is certainly a controversial topic, so if you hated this review, let us all know how much of a real Godzilla fan you are in the comments. And if you haven't already, head over to my Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 video and make sure to leave a comment complaining about the choice of music. Godzilla out.